Hello, everyone. So this is a little different. The mysterious origin of the Sumerians from World of Antiquity. Sumerians interest me, so we're going to do a video on them. Let's go.
Videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations. Please subscribe. If you are interested in ancient history, you've probably heard of the Sumerians of Mesopotamia. Although they are not the first people who lived in Mesopotamia, they are the earliest known ethnic group that inhabited the region. The Sumerians, along with the Egyptians, are known for being the earliest known people to develop a fully developed writing system. When I say fully developed, I mean that the writing system could represent language in complete sentences. The Sumerians are also known for being the ones who built, beginning in the 4th millennium BCE, some of the earliest cities in the world, and who were the developers of the calendar and timekeeping systems that we commonly use today. When we use the word Sumerian, we are, of course, referring to people who lived in the land of Sumer and who created the distinctive culture that we call Sumerian. But we also are referencing people who spoke the language that we call Sumerian. We learned of this language when the cuneiform texts of southern Mesopotamia were deciphered. But a mystery that has befuddled scholars concerns the origins of the Sumerians. How long were they in Mesopotamia before writing and urban culture was developed? And if they came from somewhere else, where? Join me as we consider the puzzle of Sumerian origins. The origin of the Sumerians has been the subject of very intensive debate that began more than a century ago. I suppose the first question we should ask is, what is the earliest evidence for the existence of the Sumerians in southern Mesopotamia? Well, this would be with the first appearance of texts that are written in Sumerian. And there is enough inscriptional evidence to suggest that even the earliest partly syllabographic texts of southern Mesopotamia, this is before cuneiform, were written in Sumerian. And we are probably safe going as far back as the logographic texts that led neatly into the syllabographic texts. This puts us at around 36 to 3500 BCE. But before then, we have no direct evidence bearing on this question. An approach taken by physical anthropologists in the 1920s and 30s was to look at human remains found in the region and see if they could identify those that were Sumerian. One early view was that the Sumerians had short, broad skulls, whereas the Semitic people in the region had long, narrow skulls. The problem was that there was, and still is, a scarcity of well-preserved skulls to examine. And so, in order to bolster theories based on bones, iconographic evidence would be imported into their proposals. They would look for similar imagery in the art of neighboring people, compare it to their bones, and draw conclusions. But it soon became apparent that the iconographical representations were conventionalized throughout that part of the world, and so it couldn't really be linked up to the osteological data. Over time, as material evidence was gathered, it became clear that the population of Mesopotamia was a lot more complicated than what was thought, and it made the search for a Sumerian race based on bones pointless. While connecting Sumerian culture with a race has been a dead end, a connection between Sumerian culture and Sumerian language is accepted by all. Language, after all, is cultural. But even historical linguistics, which traces the movement of people by reconstructing the family trees of human language, and which sheds light on the geographic origins of many language speakers, cannot help us on this matter, because the Sumerian language has no known relatives. It's not Semitic, it's not Indo-European. Efforts have been made to connect it with modern languages, such as Turkish or Hungarian or Sino-Tibetan.
Is it still spoken today? because I know like Sanskrit is a dead language, but what did they speak? Is Sumerian? Can you still speak it today? Because if you can still speak it, then you should be able to link it to something. Unless you, I don't know. So they just came up with their own language, or was it the Anunnaki? Ooh.
But these have not been convincing because they often rely on naive comparisons of sounds and meaning without regard to grammar. A more serious attempt has been made to associate it with the Uralic language family, but that has not gained much traction, largely because of our limited knowledge of Sumerian phonology. So, most scholars still consider it an isolated language. Now, it's true that typologically, Sumerian shares some grammatical features in common with some other languages, such as Basque, Georgian, and an early language spoken in Siberia called Chukchi. But this doesn't really help us in determining Sumerian's parentage, because similar features occur independently all over the globe. Even the Sumerian name for their language doesn't help. They called it Emegir, which simply means native tongue. No one really knows where the Sumerian language came from, so this will not help us to determine how long the Sumerians had been in Mesopotamia by the time their experiments in writing began. Here are the archaeological periods under consideration. The earliest logographic texts date to the middle of the Uruk period, which is the time that saw the emergence of urbanism in Mesopotamia. So scholars are generally agreed that a date just prior to 3600 is the latest possible date for the arrival of the Sumerians in the area. Before the Uruk period, and partly overlapping it, was the Ubaid period, which is the period that the alluvial plain in southern Mesopotamia was first settled. Were the Sumerians there during the Ubaid period? Scholars are not in agreement over the most likely scenario. There are three chief hypotheses that have attracted support. One is that the Sumerians were already in Mesopotamia since the beginning of the Ubaid period, and maybe even before, and that they are among those who first settled the alluvial plain. The evidence for this is mainly archaeological. The archaeological record during the Ubaid and early Uruk periods does not indicate any cultural change that might indicate an influx of a new group into the area. The Ubaid material culture appears to seamlessly and smoothly develop gradually into the Uruk material culture. Temple architecture and forms of worship show continuity rather than a shift. A competing hypothesis is that the Sumerians had only recently arrived in Mesopotamia when their logographic texts began to be written. As evidence for this, scholars leaning towards this view appeal to the Sumerian language itself. There are words in the language that appear to be foreign language words that the Sumerians adopted. These words include the names of the Euphrates River, which they called Buranun, and the Tigris River, which they called Idiglat, and the names of several major settlements, including Eridu, Ur, Larsa, Isin, Lagash, Nippur, and Kish. This would suggest that these cities were founded before the Sumerians got there, and then the Sumerians just continued to use their original names. Also, some basic words for agriculture and agricultural tools.
They used the original names, but okay, they use the original names. Isn't there a way to translate that name into your native language? Would they? I'm just thinking about now how stupid that is that I just said that. Because, like, London. Okay. Now imagine if I called it Weehee. People would be like, what did you just say? I'm going to go to Weehee. I would be slapped. So yeah, don't do that. Don't listen. What I just said, we're just going to act like it didn't say it.
Tools, such as the words for plow, furrow, date, palm, farmer, and basic words for urban crafts, such as potter, metalworker, mason, carpenter, do not appear to be Sumerian words, so it seems as if the Sumerians moved into the area and learned these words from the people who were already using this technology. Now, the argument that proponents of the first hypothesis give against this evidence is that our understanding of the growth and development of the Sumerian language before the time of writing is extremely limited, and we cannot say for certain these aren't Sumerian words. Those who posit a late arrival of the Sumerians do not agree on where the Sumerians came from. Some scholars suggest they came by sea from the Persian Gulf and originated somewhere to the south. Others suppose they came from the north, near the Caspian Sea. Yet others say they came from the direction of Iran, to the east. But all these are just educated guesses. I found a strange research paper in the journal Advances in Anthropology, written by a retired physician, that argued that the Sumerians were so enamored of lapis lazuli that they must have come from somewhere that had an abundance of lapis lazuli. And he narrowed it down to Turkmenistan. This hypothesis hasn't gained any adherents that I know of, probably because...
What is lapolazi or laplazi? I don't even know if I said the word right, let alone know what it is.
Because a society can easily fall in love with imported products. They don't need to have ever lived where the product was obtained. A shift in more recent times into looking at the interactions between various groups in the archaeological record has led to a third hypothesis, which is that the Sumerians were an amalgamation of many groups who migrated into Mesopotamia during the Ubaid and especially the early Uruk period. Streams of immigrants coming from many directions and speaking different languages came to Mesopotamia over the course of several centuries, and they gradually adopted a common culture and produced a common language. In other words, the Sumerians never existed.
So they became, like the United States, a melting pot, and then they called themselves Sumerian? I don't know, because if I use that example, there are still people that are proud to be Irish, proud to be German, proud to be Polish, Chinese, Japanese. You know, you could be, they could say we're Sumerian, but they might still say, you know, I'm Irish Sumerian. You know what I mean? They're still going to be what they were, even if I don't know. I don't know if I would. That makes more sense, but I don't know if I go with that one. You would have to really have a coming together and being together for so long, and I mean generations, that you would drop what you were and now focus on what you are, if that makes sense.
Outside of Mesopotamia, but they also didn't exist in Mesopotamia either until a certain point. This would explain why there are some words in Sumerian that appear foreign, and also why the material culture shows smooth and gradual development over time. What about DNA? Can this shed any light on the subject? To date, not much work on this question has been done in genetics, but there was an interesting study done on the Marsh Arabs. These are people who had lived for a very long time in the marshes of southern Iraq, right where the Sumerians had once lived. The question was, were the Marsh Arabs descendants of the Sumerians, or were they a group that migrated into the area in later times? The genetic study indicated that the mtDNAs and Y chromosomes of the modern Marsh Arabs are predominantly of ancient Middle Eastern origin, so they very well could be the descendants of the Sumerians. Moreover, these people had no significant ancient Indian or Southern Asian ancestry. This would indicate that the Sumerians did not come from South Asia. The Marsh Arabs did possess certain cultural features associated with South Asia, such as water buffalo breeding and rice farming, which were most likely introduced from the Indian subcontinent. But as this only marginally affected their gene pool, the study concludes that they did not come from South Asia. It's early days here on the DNA evidence, so we will have to wait and see. Right now, there is really no way to tell how long the Sumerians were in Mesopotamia, or where they came from. It is a mystery that may never be solved. We shall see. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up.
I'm going to give it a thumbs up, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping I would. I was wanting a little more answers. And that's not his fault. But maybe I'll try to find another one. A little more detail. There were some really long ones, and I just didn't want to get into it. I didn't want to get into a super long one because I don't know enough about it to know if I would. I don't want a 50-minute video and then 8 minutes in I think, oh, this is a terrible idea. So, but if Sumerians are interesting to you and you have a better video, let me know, because I'll definitely react to it. All right, so we're gonna end this here. There's a thanks button. You can donate to the channel. You don't have to. All donations are appreciated. You can request videos. Subscribe, hit that bell. It does something. Only the warrior knows. And give a thumbs up. See, watch. See this right here? Bagaboosh. You hit the other one, and from my understanding, you hit the other one and you die within 7 days. Some girl comes out of a well. She like crawls through a TV, and she's like, "Why'd you hit the thumbs down button?" And then she kills you. Don't do that. So until next time, have a good day, have a good night.